Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Danny and Courtney Talk About. I'm Danny, and with me, as always, is.
Courtney, also known as animation enthusiast. And let me just say a small disclaimer. I do have a little bit of a cold, so if it may seem that I have a nasally voice, that's probably why. So just a heads up.
Well, thank you for giving us that heads up. All the same, even though you are sick, I still can't thank you enough for joining me.
Mm.
Um, so, in this review, we are continuing where we left off. We are continuing the celebration of the book Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and its 50th anniversary. So, in our last review, we looked at the very first film adaptation, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Now, today, we are going to look at the other well known film adaptation, and that is Tim Burton's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, released in 2005. Now, Courtney, if you're up for it, would you mind telling everyone what the movie's about?
Okay. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory tells the story of a small boy named Charlie Bucket and his journey inside a magical chocolate factory run by the famous candy maker Willy Wonka. One day, Willy Wonka hides five golden tickets inside five Wonka bars around the world, and whoever finds one gets to visit his chocolate factory. Charlie wants to go, but because his family is very poor, he can't afford to buy any chocolate. One day, he finds money in the sewer, and he uses some of it to buy a Wonka bar. Much to his surprise, he finds the last golden ticket, and so Charlie and his Grandpa Joe get to go inside Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. Along the way, we get to meet four bratty children who get their comeuppances one by one. We learn many great secrets inside the chocolate factory, such as who helps make the chocolate. And we get to explore a great chocolate factory led by a great candy wizard. Basically, from a story standpoint, it's mostly the same as the previous Willy Wonka movie. However, one major difference is that after a certain point, the focus changes to Willy Wonka, and we learn about his backstory and his dentist father, as well as a couple of other things.
Yep, that's pretty much the story in a nutshell. And Courtney wasn't exaggerating. It is it's almost like the same from a story standpoint as the old movie. Now, before we get into our discussion, I do have to make a very, very important disclaimer. This movie is not a remake of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. A lot of people think that this was a remake because both movies are based off of the same book, but it's not. It was never meant to be, and I can actually kind of see why people make that mistake because there's only one other adaptation
Hmm.
for film, but it's not a remake. It's another adaptation.
Hmm.
I mean, if there were a bajillion other adaptations, like with books like Alice in Wonderland or Treasure Island, then people would probably understand. But well, yeah, we made that point. You understand?
Yeah.
So yeah, the reason why they made this other adaptation is because I think after the original movie came out, some film producers wanted to make a more faithful adaptation of Roald Dahl's original book, and this movie actually was in development for years until Tim Burton came along and put his spin on it. And like I said, it actually there are some things about it that are closer to the book, and actually we'll get into that. I'll get into that shortly. Courtney, why don't you start the discussion? We're gonna start with talking about what we liked about this movie first. So why don't you start?
All right. What I liked about this one is that in addition to the film's plot, like the original movie, they did add some good backstory stuff, like to Willy Wonka. So in a sense, it was kind of like a subplot sort of idea where you'd have the main story with Charlie, and you have Willy Wonka's subplot with his father.
Anything else you liked?
Um, well, actually, remember when we talked about how we didn't like the tunnel scene in the original movie?
Yes, I remember that.
It actually worked in this movie. I think considering Tim Burton's movies are usually dark, I think it worked pretty well in it.
Yeah, but to be fair though, that tunnel scene was not a crazy drug trip. That was just them going down a dark tunnel. Actually, I will jump in and say one thing I do really like about this movie is the art direction, um, and such. As you know, Tim Burton is a visual genius when it comes to his movies, um, and and this is a very imaginative story. And he also does one thing like before they go into the factory, he does a very good job at setting up the world as very timeless, just like the old movie did. And of course, when they get into the factory, we see all sorts of really cool stuff. And because Tim Burton had a much bigger budget this time around, we are able to see more of the book's crazy imagination. And, do you agree, or do you have different thoughts?
It's I would say it's kind of mixed. So for example, when Willy Wonka takes the children and their parents in to see the factory the first time, I thought that setting was well done. But if there was something that I didn't like in regards to visually, or I should say like a least favorite scene, would have to be the scene with the squirrels. I thought that was pretty messed up.
Actually, there's a reason why they have that scene with the squirrels. That's actually something taken straight from the book. See, as I mentioned in the other review, in the book there are squirrels, but because the old movie didn't have a very big budget, they had to replace them with geese. And like I said before, because Tim Burton had an unlimited budget here, he was able to do squirrels. So you kind of have to blame the author for that.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I thought the movie looked really good. Although I think there were some parts of the factory that looked a little dark. Like one thing I loved about the old movie is that everything was very well had very good lighting. You could see all the bright colors. This
Mhm.
movie didn't really have very much of that. But then again, this is a Tim Burton movie. He likes
Mhm.
dark visuals, so
Yeah,
I'll
that
let
is
mm,
true.
yeah. Well, let's see what else worked. Let's actually talk about characters and whether they worked or not. Are there any characters in this interpretation that you thought were done very well?
Um, I'd have to say I liked the modern take on each of the bratty kids.
I was,
Because now that we're at the time, it was made in 2005, so you can make more references, to current things like video games, for example. That was one.
you just took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say that too. I really love what this movie did to the four bratty kids. Augustus and Veruca are kind of the same as they were in the old movie, except I think Augustus is a little more gluttonous and Veruca is kind of downplayed. But I love what they did with Violet and Mike, where with Violet they made her kind of obsessed with winning and being competitive, much more than the old movie. And what they did with Mike, they made him like sort of raised by technology, but at the same time he thinks he's kind of a smarty pants and he's very condescending towards other people. So yeah,
Mhm.
any other characters you thought were done well?
I thought the role of Charlie was actually done decently.
Yeah, I'll get to Charlie in a little bit. I will say one role I thought was done also pretty well was Grandpa Joe. Even though
Mhm.
I kind of like the old one a little bit more because he had more personality, I still like this one a lot too. Because he seemed like kind of a nice old man who really loved his grandson, and I like one thing that was not in the book that they added. was they gave him a backstory establishing him as one of Willy Wonka's old factory workers.
Mhm.
And I thought that was really cool. And of course, he's a very nice guy, and I like him. And what did you think of the Oompa Loompas?
The Oompa Loompas, to be honest, they just seemed like filler every time they showed up.
Ah, it's interesting. I thought the Oompa Loompas were actually done pretty well too. I mean, yeah, they're not as memorable as the old ones, mainly because the old ones looked really strange with their orange skin and green hair and white eyebrows. But I thought like they're taken straight from the book. Actually, a fun fact: all of the songs that they sing are actually taken directly from the book as well. All the lyrics are lyrics straight from the book.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the book had like songs with the Oompa Loompas, except they were pretty long and obviously they had no music. So I like what Danny Elfman did here. Uh, I think it was smart of him to shorten the songs and to kind of give each one a different sound. But yeah, so I thought they were all right. And I think it's interesting that they got Deep Roy, the actor, to play all of them, like with digital technology.
hmm I mean, I
Uh,
will admit that was pretty impressive.
yeah. Let's see. Is there anything else that worked for you in this movie?
Um, actually, another part of the film that I liked was the elevator. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I like the elevator scene too. Um, that's also, like I've said, that's taken straight from the book. But it was able to showcase what Roald Dahl's had imagined in his book that we couldn't really see in the old one. So I give them credit for, showing us more than what we originally got. And of course, the last thing I'll say about what does work about this movie is that, a lot of the stuff that they do adapt from the book is pretty good. Like, I like that, yeah, they included, like, some more of Wonka's, like the factory backstory. They even included that cute scene with the Indian prince, and yeah, I think it was pretty good with what they did. But now, oh boy, time to talk about what doesn't work about this movie. Are you ready?
Yep.
Why don't you go first? What didn't work for you, if anything?
So I'm gonna say Johnny Depp's interpretation of Willy Wonka.
You took the words right out of my mouth again, but I'll let you go first. Talk about why you didn't
So
like him.
I didn't really like how he treated the other characters. I thought he was a bit too brash and just uncaring and basically like unpleasant to be around, even though he is in fact Willy Wonka. But
Yeah, I didn't really. That's actually, if there are three major problems I have with this movie, this one is probably my biggest with how they handled the Willy Wonka character. And yes, I agree with you completely. He is really kind of uncomfortable to be around. The word I would use is really awkward. Like
hmm
even like scenes where he's trying to be cool or when he's just trying to have fun, it feels really uncomfortable and like I mean, don't get me wrong, I think Johnny Depp is a very good actor.
oh
And
no, I don't have anything against him or anything like that.
yeah, and I think he's done wonderful work with Tim Burton in the past. Like I loved him in Edward Scissorhands and I loved him even more in Ed Wood, but oh my gosh, it's like he was so awkward. It was uncomfortable.
hmm
I'm Perumi Salt. It's very nice to meet you, sir. I always thought a verruca was a type of wart you got on the bottom of your foot. Everything in this room is eatable. Even I'm eatable. But that is called cannibalism, my dear children, and is in fact frowned upon in most societies.
Who wants a beard?
Well, beatniks for one, folk singers and motorbike riders. You know, all those hip, jazzy, super cool, neat, keen, and groovy cats. It's in the fridge, Daddy-O. Are you hep to the jive? Can you dig what I'm laying down? I knew that you could. Slide me some skin, soul brother.
Ah, this is a room I know all about. For you see, Mr. Wonka, I myself am in the nut business. Are you using the Havermax 4000 to do your sorting?
No. You're really weird.
You smell like peanuts. I love peanuts.
Oh, thank you. You smell like old people and soap.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he could have pulled off sort of like a Gene Wilder kind of character, but I don't know why they didn't go with that. They sort of made him just this really hyperactive man child who looks weird. Now,
Yeah.
I've heard some people defend this movie by saying that Wonka acts like that because that's what you get when you hang around Oompa Loompas for a lot of your life. I don't know if that really is a good defense. Do you?
Neither do I. I mean, I don't get what the Oompa Loompas have to do with his personality.
Yeah, I mean, like we see them throughout the movie. They're pretty civilized. They're pretty dignified characters, and they're pretty stoic. Even though what they do jump into musical numbers, but so I don't see how they have any influence on his personality. It's just I think it was bad direction from Tim Burton, and I really hate saying that because like I said before, I do like his other movies. Is there anything else that didn't work for you, if anything?
Um, it seemed, well, I mean, technically it's new stuff added, but like sort of the pacing was a little slower, but again, I think that comes with like the backstory type stuff, like especially like in the beginning, I think.
Yeah, I thought the pacing I think I was kind of the opposite. I thought they were going a little too fast towards the beginning. Remember the old movie took its time with the whole golden ticket competition?
Yeah, I agree.
They really rushed through that. I mean, they did a good job with all the characters winning their tickets, but it would have been funny seeing scenes like the guy who builds the machine to try to find the golden ticket, or stuff like that. Um,
Yeah.
but like I said before, it's another adaptation. It does what it wants to do. It's not trying to be like the old movie, which might also be kind of a problem too, but I'll get into that a little bit later. Another big problem I had with this movie was actually how they handled Charlie Bucket. I know earlier you said you thought they did a good job. Well,
Well, it's more like decent. I mean, he's still the pure kid that you know, but you can add on to what you were saying.
well, yeah, he is like I said in the other video, he is the definitive good kid, but I think Burton went a little too far with making him the good kid. Like I know Charlie is the good kid in the book, and actually this movie's interpretation's closer to the book than the old Charlie is, except this version he's way too saintly and perfect. And there's actually one scene that really kind of it really grinds my gears. And that's yeah, you know what really grinds my gears about this Charlie? Well, it's that scene where after he wins the golden ticket, actually no, before I get to that backstory, early on in the movie, after Grandpa Joe tells the story about Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, there's a line where he says, "I would give anything just to go back into that chocolate factory." and see it with my own eyes. Well, when Charlie does win the ticket and he shows it to Grandpa after he does his little dance of happiness, Charlie stops him and he's like, "No, we're not going to the factory. A woman offered me money for this ticket. I bet other people would offer more. We need
Oh
the
yeah,
money
you've got
more
a
than
good point.
we need the money more than we need the chocolate." Yeah, that scene kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I
Hmm.
mean, first of all, would a real little kid give away a priceless golden ticket like
No.
that gives? No, I wouldn't. Book Charlie didn't. Yeah, and it seemed like he was like right there, even though it might have been morally the right thing to do. It felt like he was stabbing his grandpa in the back.
I
I mean,
know. It's like, oh, you've got golden tickets. Well, I'm gonna sell these for food because that's the right thing to do.
thankfully though, his other grandfather, Grandpa George, calls him out on it, and unfortunately, that means that's the most of his character development. Remember in the old, like in the other video, when I mentioned one thing the movie did better was how they handled Charlie's character development?
Yes.
Well, even though he kind of does have more development in this movie through this scene than he does in the book, that's where it stops. That's his growth through the entire movie. And that, I guess, leads to my other biggest problem, and that is with like when they change the focus to Willy Wonka after a certain point. Now I know you said you liked it. I personally thought it seemed unnecessary. Like, do you want to say anything else about it? Like the
Um,
backstory about him and his father?
I mean, I just thought it was kind of interesting that they did some little backstory stuff that the original film didn't, but I think in the long run, it kind of slowed down the movie a bit. And considering it's Charlie in the chocolate factory and not Willy Wonka in the chocolate factory, and
Yeah, that is right. I mean, obviously the movie starts out being about Charlie, but then after, like once they get to the factory, it starts being about Willy Wonka. And it's kind of weird that they did that. Because in the book and in the old movie, Willy Wonka is kind of supposed to be like a magical mentor kind of figure who helps the characters on their journey, and he's kind of like Merlin or Aslan or Mr.
mm-hmm,
Miyagi or Yoda. Uh,
yep.
but in this movie, well, first of all, in this movie, he's nothing like any of those characters.
Oh, definitely not.
No. But yeah, it kind of took away the fun mystery of the character. And of course, it didn't help that he was really awkward and had no charm to his character whatsoever. I mean, for
Yeah, just
goodness
back
sakes.
away slowly.
I mean, for goodness sakes, man, you're a candy salesman. Salesmen are supposed to be charming, not weird.
um,
So yeah, I thought it felt unnecessary. I think if they had cut all that stuff out and changed Willy Wonka's character to be closer to the Gene Wilder version or the book, either one, I think it would have been a much better movie.
yes, and I agree. Even though, I mean, like, as I said in the previous video, I haven't read the book, but I think, with those changes, everything, I would have liked the movie much better.
Yeah, well, if there's one thing, uh, the thing is, even though this movie is closer to the book than the old movie is, it makes just as many changes as the old movie does. Actually, the old movie's version of Willy Wonka is actually closer to the book than this movie's is. And I think what they were trying to do with this movie is they were trying their best to make it as unlike the old movie as possible. And I don't know if that's really how you should go about telling a story. Because my belief is if something works, you keep it. If it doesn't, you change it. That's the whole thing with adaptations.
Mm-hmm.
But now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about trivia. Do you know
Trivia
anything?
time.
Do you know anything interesting about this movie?
Um, I think I don't know where I heard this from or if it was in one of Mr. Coates' videos, but I believe Tim Burton didn't like the original movie, so he decided to make his own version, I
Yeah,
guess.
I heard that too. And I think that's kind of why he was trying to be as unlike the old movie as possible. Unfortunately, I don't think this really worked to his advantage, but in some cases it did, but in other cases not so much. Another thing interesting, I learned something interesting, and this is actually I heard from Band Geek 8408. One reason why Roald Dahl did not like the old Willy Wonka movie is because he didn't like that there was a lot of focus on the Willy Wonka character as opposed to Charlie. My belief is if he saw this movie, if he was alive to see that movie, he probably would have despised it even more
I
because
think so too. He probably would have. Well, I'm knowing, he's probably rolling in his grave or whatever if he. I'm imagine he did see it, but
in
yeah.
you mean
Anywho,
yeah, but then again, I don't know. Maybe I'm making an assumption based off what I don't know. For all we
right.
know, if he was still alive, maybe he would have hated all of the adaptations of his books, like Matilda and The Witches and James and the Giant Peach and Fantastic Mr. Fox and so on. I don't
Hmm.
know. I mean, I do have some other bits of trivia I think I've found out over the years. Apparently, this movie went through a lot of different directors before they settled on Tim Burton. I
Oh,
think
you
one
don't
of them,
say.
I think one of them was Rob Minkoff. Uh, he's the guy who directed Lion King and Mr. Peabody and Sherman and the Stuart Little movies.
Oh, okay. Mhm.
And let's see, anything else? Well, I think if I remember correctly, you know, at the time when this movie came out, there had already been established a Wonka candy line from Nestle, and I think when this movie was coming out, the all the current Wonka candies were having their own little golden ticket things, and if you found a golden ticket, you would have won like a prize.
Oh, that's cool.
It makes me wish I had went hunting for chocolate bars
Uh,
back then.
mm-hmm.
But anyway, it's in the past now.
Mm.
Let's see. Is there anything else worth noting of interest?
Not that I really know of, actually.
Yeah, well, that's okay. Oh, well, there is one thing I did find out. Not too long ago, there was the original actor who played Willy Wonka, Gene Wilder, did an interview uh, that was televised somewhere, and at one point, the person asking him questions asked him what he thought about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Take a wild guess what he said. I'm not going to say anything. Take a guess.
He never read the book.
No, actually, that's not what he said.
Oh,
I'm talking
it
about
was a
this.
good guess.
I was talking about this movie.
Right. Oh, I thought you were talking about the book.
No, no, they meant, because before early in the interview they were talking about Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and so they moved on. Um, and they mentioned Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Well, I'll tell you what he said. He didn't really like this movie.
That's no surprise.
Yeah, he actually said he likes Johnny Depp as an actor, but he says, he wasn't crazy about the direction. You know what? Why am I saying this? Why don't I just show a clip of the interview?
Are you bothered by remakes of classic films of yours like Willy Wonka, Charlie, and the Chocolate Factory?
I think it's an insult. And it's probably Warner Brothers' insult, I think. I like Warner Brothers for other reasons, but to do that with Johnny Depp, who I think is a good actor, and I like him, but I don't care for that director, and he's a talented man, but I don't care for him for doing stuff like he did.
So yeah, that's what he said. And hopefully maybe future, if there are any other future adaptations of this book, hopefully they try to, I'll take my advice, use what works, take out what doesn't, and you'll have a very good story. And by that I mean use all three versions. Use all three. Use the imagination of the book, the character development and portrayals of Wonka from the old movies, and the portrayal of the kids and some of the other aspects of the new movie. So yeah, I guess we didn't really mention our opinions of the movie, so let's do our final thoughts. Overall, what did you think of this movie?
Overall, I give it a thumbs down, and actually, for this review, I did actually watch it a second time, because originally when I watched it, the first time, it was when it came out on DVD, and I didn't like it then, I didn't like it now, so.
Not even with any of the good stuff?
I mean, there were like a few good aspects of it here and there. I mean, I will say that aspect of my opinion changed, but yeah, I still don't really like it at all.
Well, okay. Thank you for sharing. Um, Overall, I'm going to say I have mixed feelings about this movie. I think Burton did a lot of things right. The portrayal of the four bratty kids. I love the way the movie looks. I loved how he was able to use a lot of the imagination. I liked how he stuck to things sort of closer to the book. At the same time, I also didn't really like his how Johnny Depp portrayed Willy Wonka, and I also didn't like. I mean, I liked him at first, but I didn't really like how they did Charlie after a certain point by making him too much of a goody two shoes. And I thought the backstory with his father was kind of unnecessary as well. So, mixed opinion. What am I going to do? I'm going to give this my very first thumb sideways. So, yeah, I have mixed opinions, and that's what I'll give it. Thumbs sideways. Will my opinion change in the future? Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, that's all I really got to say for now about this movie. So I guess I can say if you liked the book and you also liked the old movie, or you didn't like the old movie, you can check this movie out if you really want to. Wouldn't do you think that's a good recommendation or no?
I would think so.
Yeah.
I mean, even if I personally didn't like it, I'm sure, someone will, after seeing this review, or maybe they haven't, or who knows.
Yeah, maybe. But anyway, that's all we have to say for now. This is Danny here saying I am awesome, so are you. Courtney's especially awesome for getting through this review even with a cold.
Yay, I survived. Yes, you're awesome too, Danny.
Thank you. You want to say any closing words?
Check out this clip at the end of the video.
Yes, enjoy some Oompa Loompas dancing. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go get some chocolate.
And I'm gonna get a tissue.
See you later, folks.
Take care.
Augustus Gloop, the great bakery evening complete. Augustus Gloop, so big and vile, so greedy, foul, and infantile. Come on, we cry, the time is right to send him shooting up